Okay, so but then at some point you ended up coming over to Europe. You ended up in Italy,
Uh,
Bergamo.
well, actually, backtrack. I
Hmm.
actually went to Finland.
Oh, you went to
I
Finland
went to
first.
Finland. Finland was my actually this kind of let me go back again.
Hmm.
When the whole situation between Seattle Seahawks and the Oakland Raiders didn't mature, if you will,
Hmm.
due to the agent situation. I actually again there was a coach who saw me play at University of Washington, and he was the I want to say running backs coach or offensive coordinator at Vancouver BC Lions, Canadian football. So they called my new agent, who was a family lawyer, who did kind of deal with the CFL. He had more Major League Baseball players
Hmm.
than football players. He calls me up and he says, "Hey, would you like to go right now for this weekend to a workout in the CFL to the BC Lions?" I said, "Absolutely." I was already, you know, still in shape, still ready, because it's one of those things. I believe if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready,
Hmm.
type of deal. So I was still living in Las Vegas at that time, and so boom, on a whim, weekend flew to Seattle, and then drove up to Vancouver, and then did my workout. Again, during that workout, I tested. I ran a 4.3840. Everything is going great. Now, mind you, this is Canadian football, so the ball is a little bit different. You have to really learn to be a receiver, not necessarily be a receiver out of the backfield, but truly understand what wide receivers do. Going in motion left and right and so on. So we're doing that, and I think at that time on that weekend they were hosting other players as well. So we went through the entire process, and on my very last route that I had to run, I pulled my hamstring.
Hmm.
But for them, it was still okay because they had seen enough. And again, that offensive coordinator, he saw me when I was at University of Washington, and so he was like, "Yeah, I remember you. You were a phenomenal.
Right.
So we've tracked you, and that's great. It would be good to have you here." They had a full backfield, so at that time, it was one of those. If one of these running backs go down, you're our guy. We're calling you first. Again, luck of the draw, no one got hurt at that time. So I was still waiting, for the call, but it was okay because again, I always tend to say, blessings come in so many different ways, shapes, and forms. So even though it may not have seemed as a blessing for me to pull my hamstring and for that situation to happen, it was because it was enough time for me to obviously get my body back healthy, for me to readjust my training regimen,
Hmm.
readjust my nutrition, and understand more about the body. But then came the opportunity to play arena football. And so, boom, I moved over to New Hampshire, to the New England area, and then I started to kind of get my indoor football experience from arena to football. That being said, right after that, that's when I went to Finland.
Hmm.
And to be quite honest, I did a combine, a regional combine in Atlanta, and I think it was at Clark Atlanta University.
Hmm.
And I went into that regional combine with a totally different mindset of I am simply the best player that is here, and I would definitely put that on full display. I did that, ran roughly the same time. I think even then it was roughly about a 4.42 or so 40.
Okay.
Tested great. When you go to those regional combines, there are many different teams from all over the world. And you have indoor football, you have arena football, you have European football, and so
Hmm.
on. A team got my statistics of what I did there. They contacted me directly, and I said, "Yeah, let's do it," because I wanted to stay fresh. You know what I mean? I wanted to keep my mind and my body active within the sport, and I needed a break. So I left, went over to Finland, and being able to kind of rehone and use the Finnish league, if you will, to kind of just rehone my skills, my skill set as a running back, getting back to what made me who I was before college, after college, and so on. So after that, then I was back in Arizona after having a stellar season in Finland. Back in Arizona, I'm training, and I'm literally working out at Mesa Community College on their football field, and I'm working out a bunch of other players. I think there was maybe about 4 or 5 other receivers, going through route running, going through drills, things that I've picked up in my time and what I've learned, and then giving it to them. There's this, I look over and there's this little short guy who's just, he's running around the track, or he's walking around the track, something like this or rather, and he's looking, he stops, I look at him and I continue to do my deal. And when we finished up, he was sitting on the bench where all of the players, bags and cleats and stuff were. And so I go over there, I sit down, and he looks at me and he says, are you a player or are you a coach? And I said, actually, I'm a player, but I'm doing the best I can to help, these players and motivate them to continue on with their process.
Right.
And that coach happened to be Coach Joe Roman. And Joe Roman at that time was the head coach of the Hamburg Blue Devils. And so he said, well, have you ever, thought about playing football in Europe? And I said, yeah, I just came back, from Finland. He says, oh, okay, yeah. But Finland, their league has nothing on the German football league, and I said, okay. So I met with him later that night, and I took my highlight tapes and everything to him, and in his house in Arizona, because he's living in Arizona. In his house there is memorabilia about Hamburg Blue Devils and the Blue Devils versus Braunschweig Lions. That rivalry back then was huge. I mean, you couldn't. I would say it was the same as a USC versus UCLA or Florida versus Florida State or so on. You're talking 30,000+ fans in an arena just to watch Hamburg Blue Devils versus Braunschweig Lions. So when he showed me all of these things, I was immediately sold on that, because I knew what I did in Finland, and that came so easy for me. I needed the next challenge, if you will. So he was my Coach Joe Roman was my introduction into the GFL. And in 2005, then I was over with Hamburg Blue Devils. Short season for myself, just mainly because I had a sports hernia. And if anybody out there has ever had a sports hernia, gosh, those things, they hurt. It's very difficult to overcome that, especially as a running back, let alone if you're a receiver or a corner or any position. It's an extremely difficult injury to get over. So my season was cut short, but I had enough on tape and on film for the number 1 team in Europe at that time, the Bergamo Lions out of Italy, call and say, hey, we would like to have you on our team as our running back for this year, and so on. So
right, and so then you ended up going over there in 2006.
Right,
for a season.
Absolutely, one season, but that was the one season that was the one season that I needed. That's all I needed. Italy was absolutely amazing. Again, another beautiful country. Great football. Again, all of these countries, when you talk about playing football in Europe, Finland's the Finnish football league is phenomenal. The German football league, everybody knows about the German football league, phenomenal league. But Italy and their Italian football league is phenomenal. I mean, there's teams there that can compete with anybody in Europe. Right. And Bergamo was a team at that time, which was number 1, and I played with them. And we, the funny thing is we were actually supposed to play against Braunschweig in the playoffs, and I was looking forward to that because I had already met my girl, which was my wife now, but my girlfriend then in Hamburg, and I was looking forward to it because it was like, oh, now I get a chance to play against Braunschweig again, and so on. And unfortunately, on the weekend before that match, we both lost. So
okay.
I never got a chance to do that. But again, Braunschweig had already seen and heard, because I think both teams were overlooking the teams that we were playing to have that big matchup. And so they had already seen footage of me in Italy and me doing my thing, to where when I came to visit after we got knocked out and our season finished, my wife was obviously living here in Braunschweig, and I came to visit and went to a game, and then all of a sudden it was to go to the VIP tent, and then the coaches from the Braunschweig Lions are there, and and said, "Hey, I'm Jabari Johnson," and that's how that happened.
Right. Okay. And then you end up coming over and playing in Braunschweig.
Right.
2007. And you played there until 2017.
Right.
And in that time, 5 German Bowls. 5 German Bowls, 3 Euro Bowls.
Absolutely. Six German Bowls.
6 German Bowls.
6
okay.
German Bowls and three Euro Bowls.
So that must have been.
Wait a minute. No, I think you're right. I'm sorry. Yeah, 5.
6 championships, because you had the one in Italy and then 5 German Bowls.
Exactly.
Okay, so 5 German Bowls, 3 Euro Bowls.
Right.
But I mean, just looking at your story up to this point, as far as what happened in Washington, at the University of Washington, and then your college career at UNLV.
Right.
And as you mentioned earlier in the interview, you mentioned something that I also wanted to bring up, that you are just a late bloomer.
Right.
Things didn't really pan out on the U.S. side in terms of football.
Right.
But then things really panned out on this side of the water in terms of football. And coming over here, did you imagine that you would have that much success? I know you went into the combine in Atlanta, at Clark Atlanta, with the mindset, I'm the best player here. But Of course you go in with that mindset, but most people don't come in with an arrogant attitude where I'm going to come over and I'm gonna win all the championships.
100%.
But did you imagine that you would have that much success?
I didn't, but I knew that I wanted to be successful. All right. The motivating drive for me was to set my mark, to come here and not just play football. The motivating drive was, okay, I'm going to set my mark. I know I can set my mark on the football field, but I want to embrace the culture and the lands of where I am. Right, rather so be it in Finland, or rather so be it in Italy. For me, it wasn't a matter of the mindset of me coming here to say, okay, I'm gonna be the best, and that wasn't it for me. That for me was I never even thought about that in that regards of when I came here to Germany. For me, it was more or less, and I even think I had an interview back then when I first came, and I told the reporter, what I would love to do is to learn German, and I would love to find my wife. I can see my wife being German and so on, and we just had this conversation, not thinking that would actually come to pass, if you will. Right. But that was my mind frame at the time, because I knew once I had the taste of how football is in Europe, it left me with wanting more, but more outside of the sport as well.
Okay.
And so, but again, let me kind of go back. I want everybody to understand this, is that by me saying when I went to Clark Atlanta to do these regional combines that I'm the best player, it wasn't a sense of arrogance, but you have to have confidence about your abilities. You have to be, for me, it was like, I've been, truly blessed to be, an athlete, for one. But all of my belief is in the Lord. And if I knew if it takes just a small grain of a mustard seed to believe in Him, and I will receive everything back in return, was the process, then that meant for me to go out and train every day and believe in the training that I'm doing.
Right.
You understand?
Right.
And then let the rest take care of itself. So when I went to that combine, it wasn't me in the sense of this, this arrogance. It was just more or less that I am definitely confident, but it's upon me to show that today.
Yeah, it was definitely, also understood as confidence.
Right.
Course,
so it was one of those deals, and like I said, it ended up bringing me to a place where, I knew after my first season with Hamburg, that at that time, that's when I had a talk with Coach Patrick Azuma, who at that time was the running back coach for the Hamburg Sea Devils, which is the NFL Europe team. And he said, hey, this is your league. This is where you can blossom. And ended up developing a very wonderful relationship with Coach Patrick Azuma, and him kind of also being that mentor, if you will, and saying, you can do this and you can do that. That helped me also come to terms with just saying, what, Germany is a beautiful place, people, land, and so on. So
right, and as an athlete in general, when you have, I believe anyway, when you have aspirations to be great, in most situations you have to feel like I'm the greatest, or I have something that makes me better than everyone around you. As an athlete, of course, that people who haven't had the experience of an athlete, they can interpret that as being arrogant, but an athlete knows that isn't arrogance. That's a form of internal motivation.
Absolutely.
Because if being an athlete is more mental than anything, they always say that about football. Football is 90% mental, 10% physical. 100%. If you don't believe you can achieve whatever it is you want to achieve, then you've already lost.
Exactly.
So you have to know, our coaches would always say, I'm sure your coaches always also said that before the game, visualize yourself making the plays.
Absolutely.
Visualize it. So if you don't have this vision beforehand,
absolutely,
it most likely will never materialize. So
absolutely,
it was clear for me that it wasn't arrogance.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that everybody else gets that as well. But 100%.